Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our session. My name is Grady Hunt, and I'm a member of the North Carolina Board of Transportation, representing Division 6, which is in the southeastern part of our state. Traffic safety is a bit of a pet project of mine. Along with other community partners, we piloted the first local Vision Zero task force in North Carolina to examine ways to reduce traffic fatalities in our area. We've got a terrific set of panelists today to talk about this subject. I'm very interested in listening to them because we can do all the maintenance, it seems, of our highways. We can do all the engineering, but it really comes down to driver behavior. It just seems like that's what really complicates things for us, and I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say about how we deal with that. Before we hear from our panel of experts, there are a few housekeeping matters that I'd like to take care of. First of all, please use the Summit app to answer this question. What actions can be taken to reduce traffic deaths from speeding, impaired driving, and non-buckled passengers? We'll show the poll results later in the session. We encourage you to take the poll and engage with us during the question and answer session of part of this session. And remember, please wear your mask unless you're eating or drinking. Now let's get started. During the pandemic, we saw a lot of different phenomenons, especially in 2020. We saw an alarming trend in North Carolina. While overall vehicle miles traveled were down, traffic-related fatalities rose by 13%. And unfortunately, it seems that trend is also carried over to 2021. This trend was also national, and for us in Division 6, it was local. Fewer cars are on the road, but more fatalities. Why? This is a complex question that our panelists will dive into today. They bring some very great and diverse viewpoints through which they are examining this issue. From a nationwide perspective, on a state level, and even psychology looking at driver behavior. We're honored to welcome these panelists to North Carolina. First, I'd like to welcome Stephanie Hancock. Stephanie is Administrator for the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. She oversees partnerships between NHTSA and Washington, D.C., Kentucky, Maryland, North Carolina, Virginia, and West Virginia. She has years of experience spearheading national traffic safety campaign and planning efforts. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you. Thank you, Grady. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. I want to do a shout out to Mark Ezel. He's the one that invited me, and let's take this off. Really appreciate him inviting me. I think I may not appreciate it so much when I get home after spending 14 hours in heels for the first time in 2 years. But other than that, I do appreciate him being here. And if you don't know him, you should get to know him. And he is the director of the Governor's Office of Highway Safety Program for the state of North Carolina. He also asked me, I'm going to talk a little bit about the numbers and what happened in 2019 versus 2020 and 2021. And what we can do about it. But he asked me to spend a little bit of time telling people what NHTSA does, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, who we are, what we do. But let me just ask, before I get into that, a show of hands. Who here is from law enforcement or emergency medical services? Do we have anybody in law enforcement? What about traffic design, transportation planning, okay, engineering? This is going to help me. I like to get to know who I'm talking to. You got to hear a little bit about me. I want to know who I'm talking to. Who else? Let me see. Do we have any other safety advocates out there? Okay. So pretty much a corporate community, folks. Okay. Okay. So a lot of traffic engineer and planners and design. So that's good. So we're going to talk about what NHTSA does. We're going to talk about what is risky driving, and we're going to look at the data. Most of the data I'm going to share with you is from NHTSA's Fatal Analysis Reporting System, and it's a national database of crash reports. So it's very helpful, and it helps us guide our plans. We're also going to talk about, again, I mentioned the best practices. What are we doing, and what could we be doing better, and what could we be doing more of to reverse this trend? How many of you right now are familiar with NHTSA? Have you heard of NHTSA? Okay, it's about, looks like a third. Okay, so I will spend a little bit of time talking about who we are. We were talking about how I'm a poor multitasker. I start talking and I realize I'm forgetting to switch my slides, but here we are. We were just talking. That's what we're going to talk about the next few minutes, and this is NHTSA's mission, okay? It's to save lives, prevent injuries, and economic costs due to traffic crashes. And we do it through education, research, setting safety standards, and enforcing those safety standards. That's what all of NHTSA does. What I do at NHTSA, I work in regional operations and program delivery. So I work in the field. And as Grady mentioned, I am the regional administrator for the NHTSA Region 3 office, and you'll see a slide later about who that encompasses. But North Carolina is our largest state in Region 3. So I'm glad to be here to talk to other folks from North Carolina, because this is where we can make a really big difference in Region 3. How many of you have heard of the governor's highway safety program? Okay, that's great. That's good. Well, if you haven't, Mark, raise your hand. This is the man you need to talk to. And I am enlisting, if I do nothing else today, I want to enlist every one of you to help us improve this situation. Because we can't no longer just rely on the highway safety folks. We need other transportation folks. We need other folks from the health community, the medical community. We cannot do this alone. And when I start showing you the numbers, I think your jaw may drop, because we had a very interesting situation happen here, and you can probably guess by the title of the presentation what that was. But at NHTSA, and again, what I do is we work very closely with, you're going to meet Pam. She's with the Governor's Association for Highway Safety. We work very closely with the highway safety offices in each state to develop and implement and evaluate life-saving programs designed to change driver behavior and promote safe driving for the drivers, the passengers, the motorcycle operators, pedestrians, bicyclists, anybody that touches the roadways. That's what our job is. How many of you have a similar mission to NHTSA's? Does anybody have okay, good. How many of you can see how the work you do day to day could tie into NHTSA's mission? Okay, good. So again, that's what I want to do. I want to enlist your help. Okay, so what do we do real quickly? I've mentioned a couple things. We are all about the relationship of the human to the vehicle. We have other modes in DOT that focus on the relationship of the vehicle to the roadway. But NHTSA, we focus on the vehicle relationship to the driver to the human, okay? And we set motor vehicle safety standards. Many of you have probably heard of the 5-star rating system for new car assessment program. We're responsible for that. We are responsible for investigating and issuing recalls. And we are also responsible for collecting data to determine where our highway safety issues are and how we can approach them, and research and investigation. But again, the two areas that I work most in is risky driving prevention behavior and programs, and how we do it. And we can't get anything done without the help of our highway safety offices. I say this all the time. They are our #1 partner. And we have some great opportunities with the recent passage of the bipartisan infrastructure law. We are seeing more resources going to highway safety than ever before. We have never in the life of NHTSA had this amount of resources that are going to be put towards highway safety. So if you have an idea, when we start talking about what we do, of how you could help us Your phone's going to be busy next week, Mark. Please reach out to Mark. And if you're not from North Carolina, please reach out to me or visit the GHSA website. And I say that website because it's a little more friendly than the NHTSA website. You can look up who in your state, where the highway safety office is. And it can be anywhere from, it might be housed in a state police. It might be housed in a Department of Motor Vehicles. It might be housed in a DOT. It could be housed in various and sundry locations depending on what state you're in. But reach out to your highway safety office because they're going to have more resources in the next few years than they've ever had before, and we need help. And even if we can't fund something, because we can't fund infrastructure, we cannot use our money to do that, you can still partner and we can still work with you because we need to start getting out of our silos. We think we're doing a good job, but I think what's happened in the last couple of years has showed us we need to do better. So, and I think that's going to be a thread you're going to hear with all my fellow panel members. So, 10 regions. If you're not from North Carolina, you can see where you fall. And again, each state highway, each state has a highway safety office as well as a governor's representative for highway safety. They have to have those two things in place to receive our funding. And every state and every territory and the District of Columbia does receive our funding. So there's a highway safety office for all of you out there. You just need to find it. And again, Region 3, we have 7 jurisdictions: North Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, DC, Delaware, West Virginia, and Maryland. In no particular order. Okay, and what do those highway safety offices do? Again, we work in close partnership with them to develop and implement and evaluate highway safety programs. We spend a lot of time looking at our data. We have a whole special grant program to look at our traffic safety data. How can we get more of it? How can we get it faster? And how can we get it better? And how can we get it more accurate? Because that's all going to help us solve this problem of risky driving that we're seeing. I'm a big fan of not reinventing the wheel and looking around other parts of the region and the country and seeing what works and stealing it. So we are going to talk, before I'm done, about some best practices that I would like to see all the states in Region 3, but definitely North Carolina, our largest state, a state that has the most fatalities in Region 3, considering them. And a lot of them they have considered, and some of them they've actually invented. So big proponent of best practices. Another thing that we work with the highway safety offices to do is develop and conduct highway safety training. And we at NHTSA assist other parts of NHTSA in their mission. We are big on recall awareness, and the bipartisan infrastructure law has a whole new grant program to increase awareness of vehicle recalls. Increase awareness and hopefully increase remedies and get people to actually know that they have a vehicle recall and go take action to fix it. And this is not a very exciting part of what we do with the Highway Safety Office, but we conduct monitoring activities to make sure the funding's being spent the way it should, because it does come with strings attached. But there's a lot of new opportunities, again, with the passage of the new bipartisan infrastructure law that expands our funding capabilities. So it's just a really opportune time to turn this trend around. But again, we can't do it alone. We need everyone's help, and everyone has a role they can play. So we can ultimately save lives. Okay, so let's just take a look at the numbers. And these numbers are from our fatal analysis reporting system. And it, unfortunately, it lags a couple years for a whole host of reasons that I could talk about in another whole session. But let's look at pre-pandemic. In 2019, 36,096 traffic fatalities. And we were going in the right direction in 2019. That was a 2% decrease from the previous year. And out of those 36,096 fatalities, over 10,000 were alcohol impaired. So that is still a big issue, and it hovers around 30%, and it tends to have done that for many years. So this is an area we really need to start thinking about how we can address differently, because even if we've seen a decrease in numbers, we haven't seen a decrease in percentages. So we need to do something different in this area. So what is risky driving? Oh, let me get back to this. We have early estimates. These are not final numbers. Early estimates showing that 2020 from 2019, there's a 7.2% increase, and it's even worse for 2021. 18.4% increase. So we are seeing astounding increases in traffic fatalities, all when there's fewer cars, and I'll talk about that in a second. So what is risky driving? Well, it's a whole host of bad driving behaviors, and Grady, you mentioned quite a few of these in your opening. It's impaired driving with alcohol and drug-impaired driving. That's, again, I'll share some information with you. You'll be shocked at how much worse that became during the pandemic. We still have a lot of people not wearing their seatbelts, speeding, driving distracted, and driving drowsy. So that's what risky driving is. It's not going in the right direction. We're here to figure out how we can turn that around. Again, some more numbers. This is just a few of the areas we're up. We're actually up in many more areas. As I mentioned, total fatalities increased, alcohol-related fatalities increased, speeding went up, not wearing your seatbelt, unrestrained fatalities went up, nighttime fatalities went up. All of these things went up when something else was happening. Vehicle miles traveled was going down. That means there were fewer people traveling, fewer cars on the roadways, so you would think that you would have fewer fatalities, and that's not what has happened the last 2 years. This is why we're all here. And again, as I said, it's not any better. We're looking at preliminary FARS data, and 2020 to 2021, an 18% increase in fatalities. I put this up here, but I'm not happy with this number. We, Region 3, where North Carolina is part of, we were the region that saw the lowest increase, but that's not a number to be happy about. A 10% increase is a 10% increase. So the nation as a whole going up 18 and Region 3 going up 10, not where we want to be. So what are those behaviors? Let's talk a little bit about them. Let's look at what North Carolina has going on. And in 2019, over 1,000 people killed on the highways. Very similar to the national numbers, about 32% are alcohol related. Speed related, very similar to the national numbers, 30% are speed related. Now this is where North Carolina is a little different, and I would like to give credit. North Carolina is the birthplace of Click It or Ticket. You guys created it, and the nation took it on as a national program. You are doing better than the nation when it comes to unbuckled fatalities, but still, far too many. You're close to 40% of the people killed in car crashes were not wearing their seatbelt. And if you work in highway safety, we always say the most effective action you can take when you get in a motor vehicle is to put your seatbelt on. It increases your chances of surviving a crash at minimum 50%. If you drive a pickup truck, 60%. If you put your child in a car seat properly installed, it jumps up to 71%. And our littlest passengers are sitting rear-facing. If they are properly sitting rear-facing in a child safety seat, their chances of surviving a crash are 90%. So never take your eye off the prize. We always have to be focusing in everything we're doing with seatbelt use rate, because if we can get more people to buckle up, it will reduce our impaired driving fatalities, it will reduce our distracted driving fatalities, it will reduce our speed-related fatalities, because you will increase your chances of surviving that crash just by putting your seatbelt on. So if you are someone out there that does not wear their seatbelt, please start. It's nothing like a good time to start today. Okay, let's spend a little bit of time on drugs and alcohol. What did we see during this time frame that we saw this increase in risky driving? Well, we saw an increase, and we don't always have, again, it takes us a while to scrub the numbers. It takes, for a whole host of reasons, again. So we're looking at what we have right now, and one of the data sets we have are EMS calls for the use of Narcan for people that have overdosed on opioids. That has increased. So we know we're seeing more drug use. Marijuana sales, alcohol sales, and people even reporting that they drove more often during the pandemic with over-the-counter or prescription drugs in their system. And there's a whole host of reasons. I'm going to let some of my colleagues talk about that. Part of it was we had a significant decrease in traffic enforcement. Law enforcement was called on to do other things, and people figured it out, and they decided it was okay to drive risky, and that's what we're trying to change. And then we also had a project. This was an interesting one. We had an existing project with 5 trauma centers where we were collecting data if a person was brought in from a serious motor vehicle crash, their blood would be taken, and we would look for alcohol, marijuana, and opioids. And we had this data pre-pandemic, and then we look at the data during the pandemic, and it's astounding the increases we saw. Now, I must make it clear, this was not a causation study. This is just looking at was there drugs and alcohol in a person's system at the time of the crash. Doesn't necessarily mean it caused the crash, but you can assume that it was in many cases a factor in the crash, because we know that marijuana can stay in your system for up to 30 days. So it may not be the cause, but these are pretty astounding numbers. Pre-pandemic, 22% of the patients coming into these trauma centers had alcohol in their system. During the pandemic, and this continues, this jumped up to 28%. Marijuana, about 20% was found in the motor vehicle crash victims' systems pre-pandemic. Jumped up 12% to 32.7% during the pandemic. And opioids almost doubled, you can see, from 7.5 to 13.9. So this is a problem area. We need to do a better job in all these areas, but in particular, alcohol and impaired driving, and as I mentioned before, seatbelt use. So I just want to take a moment to talk about, let's see what you're seeing here. There we go. There's a lot we can do that we are doing and that we could do more of and do better, as I said before. One of the things, a program we're doing in Region 3, and we've got 5 of our 7 jurisdictions on board with this program. It's called Local Heroes. It's a traffic enforcement program where it's very localized. So if you're in your town of Asheville, North Carolina, and you turn on the TV or you get on social media, you see law enforcement that you're familiar with. They're wearing the uniforms of, the Asheville Police Department. They're wearing the, uniform of somebody from the state police, the highway patrol troop in that area. The idea is it's really the spokesperson for the message is somebody you could run into at the grocery store. And the spokesperson for these highway safety, wear your seatbelt messages are law enforcement from the community. And it makes a difference because you not only see a law enforcement officer that you might recognize, you're also going to see in the ads roads that you recognize. And it's a very simple concept. Law enforcement saying, I'm writing seatbelt citations to save your lives. I would rather give you a seatbelt citation than to have to investigate a fatal crash that you were in and subsequently make a death notification. It's that's what you get. And how many of you have seen North Carolina's Local Heroes? They started out very, a handful of communities that really needed the help, and they're expanding it this year. But have you seen a Local Heroes ad? Okay. So, well, you will hopefully see some soon. We're expanding those programs. And we've started this in Kentucky, and we've evaluated, and we've had success. So we have worked hard to continue that success and get other states to take that on. But again, encouraging people to buckle up. We also have Buckle Up Religiously programs. This is where we use faith-based organizations to get the message out about the importance of wearing seatbelts and putting your kids in child safety seats. Pace setters. This is a program we work with employers to encourage buckling up because, you know, if your employee's in a crash and they don't have their seatbelt on and they get seriously injured, guess what? That person's not coming to work. You have to find somebody to replace him. You have to train that person. It can be very costly. So we bring the employers on. And we also have Saved by the Belt programs where we recognize people that have been saved by the belt. Because they had their seatbelt on, they're still here to talk to you about it. And we let them be spokespersons. We also have speeding, automated enforcement in the right place. It's very important that it be placed in the right place. Can be very helpful. Again, enforcement, we know we're down on enforcement, and we know we have a lot of research and a lot of studies that show us that enforcement of traffic laws does work and does change behavior and does make drivers drive safer. And again, education about speeding, and we've talked about impaired. Enforcement, again, there's a lot of very specialized training law enforcement goes through to be able to detect an impaired driver from alcohol and or drugs. We need to do more of that. We have a program called the Drug Recognition Expert Program where we train law enforcement to be able to recognize if a person's on a certain type of drug and that it impaired their driving. That's a program that North Carolina has embraced, and we continue to work with them to expand the number of officers that are receiving this very specialized training. Designated driver programs, alternative transportation programs, promotion, partnering with Uber, Lyft. These are all things that our highway safety officers have done with success. Also technology, it's not on there, but we have the DADS program, Driver Alcohol Detection System for Safety. And the technology is there. It's being used quite widely in Virginia, and we have a program under the new bipartisan infrastructure law to expand the use and to expand research in this program. It's technology that either works through your fingers tips or your eyes to determine whether or not you have alcohol in your system. And if you do, your car won't start. So we have to wait. That's still a lot. It's there, but it's not widely there. So, we have a lot of hope on the horizon. Distracted. We have the buckle up, phone down. And I love this because, again, it takes the attention back to seatbelt use, which is so, so very important. And again, law enforcement has gotten some really creative ways to enforce distracted driving laws by, being up in a crane or, driving around in an SUV and one person drives the other person's spot so they can see if there's phone use occurring in a vehicle. So continue with distracted driver enforcement. And again, education and drowsy driving is a tough one to crack because it's hard because it's hard to say, well, because when you fall asleep when you're in a crash, sometimes you don't remember that you've fallen asleep and you're not going to necessarily admit that you fell asleep at the wheel when the police officer comes to investigate the crash. So this one, there's a lot we can do with education, working with employers to encourage their folks not to drive drowsy, especially if they're doing shift work or they're on a job that they're on the road a lot. And eventually there will be technology to help us out with this one too. And something kind of unique we're doing, I'm making sure I'm not going over my time, so I'll wrap this up real quick. Well, one of the things we're doing in Region 3 is a program called Operation Crash Reduction, and we started it in 2019, so we're coming up on we're coming up on year 4, and we looked at our data. I had just become the regional administrator, and I said I really wanted to do something to address the fatalities on the roadways, but I wanted to do something that made sense. And we get our work done through our highway safety offices, so we ran the data, and we went back 10 years, and what we found was the deadliest month in Region 3 was the month of, anyone want to take a guess? Nope. Nope. October. Yay! Now, if I'd say to you, what part of the month, because I didn't want to ask our highway safety officers to do a month-long program in the beginning of the fiscal year, they would have been like, no way. But if we wanted to focus on one weekend, what do you think that weekend would be? Halloween. That's what I thought too. It's the second weekend in October. For Region 3 is the deadliest weekend. It's that weekend that falls right before the Columbus Day holiday. I was like, whoa, this is interesting. Again, went back 10 years, looked at all my states, and with the exception of maybe a couple years, it was DC and Delaware, October was not their deadliest month, but it was 1, 2, or 3 for all the other states for 10 years. And so we said, we need to get this information out. And we did. And again, we teamed it up with the seatbelt message. And then we asked the states, if you want to tie in another message, whether it be distracting. We had Delaware did a distracted driving and seatbelt message. We had Virginia did a occupant protection and speed message. So we let the states kind of customize it. But the good news is we've seen fatalities as a region go down every year we have done that program. So we're super excited, and we had our best year yet with all the bad stuff happening in 2021. This was sort of a ray of hope for us in Region 3. We had more agencies participating. We had over 500 drunk drivers taken off the road, another like 11,000 seatbelt citations written. So this is something that gets somebody like me that lives and breathes highway safety super excited. And I leave you with that because I feel like the numbers are a lot of doom and gloom, and I always like to leave hope with people. So I want to leave you with a ray of hope, but also I want to thank you, and I want to challenge you. This is a big problem. We are not making progress. We are going the wrong way. We need everyone's help. So I want you to think about in the next few days what your organization, your company, or you, or even you with another non-work related group that you work with, your church, your Cub Scout group, whatever. I want you to think about, how can I help reduce the number of crashes and reduce the number of lives lost on our roadways? What can I do different? What can I do more of? How can I help change this trend? So that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephanie. As you said, those numbers are both alarming and heartbreaking because these are not strangers. I say it to my Vision Zero committee all the time. These are family, friends, neighbors. We all got to do better. That's just the bottom line. Our next speaker is Pam Fisher. Pam is the Senior Director of External Engagement for the Governor's Highway Safety Association. In her role, she provides leadership and advocacy for states and U.S. territories to improve traffic safety, influence national policy, enhance program management, and promote best practices. She has more than 30 years of experience addressing behavioral safety issues at the local, state, and national level. Welcome, Pam.
Excuse me. Thank you, Grady. I appreciate that very much. Hi, everyone. I'm really honored to be here. And for those of you who have a printed program, you're probably saying, she is not John Saunders. No, I am not John Saunders. John is a very dear friend. John is the director of the Virginia Highway Safety Office. He was supposed to be here today, but he unfortunately had to cancel his participation. He's eloquent. He's passionate about this work. He's one of the members of my organization. And I hope to do him, I hope to do him proud. So I'm going to take a few minutes and build on what Stephanie was talking about. I'm going to share some data from the states that we just got, and it's not for all the states, but it is preliminary 12-month data from about 27 states, and I'll tell you where that came from shortly. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and it is very discouraging news. As Stephanie said, the numbers continue to go in the wrong direction. I'm also going to offer some insight into some strategies. I want to build upon what Stephanie was talking about, and I have 4 areas that I want to focus on, and I want to try to get to those quickly. So I need to pull up my slides. So I just realized, excuse me. Okay. Bear with me, folks. I'm not a Mac person, so this is a Mac. I'm going to let somebody who knows Mac do this. Okay.
That's you.
That's me. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, so just a real quick, if you've never heard of the Governor's Highway Safety Association before, no, we don't represent governors. We represent the state highway safety offices that have governors' representatives, as you heard Stephanie say. We are based in D.C., and we work with Mark and his team and many other folks across the state. And we do not only the management work of working with the states, but we also work. Oh, I'm sorry. Again, I don't know Mac. I'm a PC gal. There we go. That it? Okay, super duper. Thank you. We do a tremendous amount of advocacy work. We work with NHTSA very, very closely. But we also are working to really try to elevate awareness of the behavioral safety side of this business that we're all working in, and to really call attention and to make this a national priority issue. We're really heartened by what happened with the recently passed infrastructure bill. There is going to be a bigger infusion of money into behavioral safety. It's critical. But at the same time, I want to stress that many of you in the room said that you're working on the engineering or the planning side. We're all in this together, and we've got to get out of our silos and work together. That's really, really important. So let me talk for a minute about just, do a little rewind, if we will. And I think we all agree that what happened last year was scary. It was, in the past 2 years, it's been very, very scary. It's been unsettling. I refer to, the REM song, for those of you who know the group REM, it's the end of the world as we know it. And even though, we weren't feeling fine at all. We really, really weren't. So our team at GHSA went virtual on March 13th. We are back in the office in a hybrid mode. But what I share with you is that the very first day we had our Teams call, that Monday, we were all together. There's 11 of us. We were all together, and one of the staff members said, "Do you think we'll finally start to see the numbers go down?" How many of us thought that, right? How many of us? Come on, let's be honest. We did. We saw traffic volumes drop. I live in northern New Jersey. Northwest New Jersey, I'm in part of the greater New York metropolitan area. Nobody was going anywhere. We were at the epicenter of COVID. Nobody was going anywhere. And when I had people start telling me in my community, I was out on the road and people are driving like crazy people, I was like, what is going on, right? Scary, scary stuff. So we were the first organization nationally that raised the alarm and said, hey, something is wrong here. Something is happening. And so we issued a national news release to call attention to this problem, and we had a webinar to say something crazy is going on. Speeding is up. We were hearing reports from law enforcement across the country. And you heard Stephanie mention the research they did. We so appreciate the fact that on October 1st, NHTSA held a national press conference, and they confirmed what we were saying and what the media was reporting, that the open roads were becoming racetracks, that people were engaging in risky and unsafe behaviors, that bad things were happening. So we really appreciate that work and that continued partnership on NHTSA's side to do this, to really confirm what our states were telling us. You heard about the 2019 FARS data. You heard about the 2020 estimated preliminary data. And you heard a little bit about what's happening in 2021. People are dying. They're dying needlessly. This is preventable stuff. So let me share with you, and let's see how this works. I don't know how well you can see this. I can't see the screen very well. But what I'm going to tell you is that last week, Mark's counterpart from the Minnesota Highway Safety Office posted a message on the GHSA listserv, and he said, we saw a huge increase, nearly 30% in Minnesota in our fatalities for the entire 12-month period in 2021. He then asked the other states if they would share their preliminary fatality numbers for the past 12 months, as well as the 2 years prior. Many, many states joined in the discussion, and we started monitoring what was going on. And it was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. And you can see these are the states that reported into us. With the exception of North Dakota, Nebraska, and Rhode Island, states reported that fatalities from 2020 to the end of 2021 increased from a low of just 1%, but that's still not acceptable, to a high of 29%. So between 2020 and 2021, here we go again, the numbers are going up. And if we look at the difference between 2019 and 2021, we saw jumps from anywhere from 4 to 57%. These are upticks in fatalities. These are preliminary numbers. So clearly, the risky driving behavior is persisting. Speeding, lack of belt use, impaired driving, including multiple substance use, and distraction. These are the leading problems. So we also know, and this is really critical, folks, and I can't overstate this, we need everyone's support here. We know that a reduction in enforcement is a factor in an uptick in these fatalities. We've heard this. Initially, we know the pandemic really resulted in officers being reassigned from traffic enforcement to dealing with issues related to COVID. We know that. Also, this was compounded by the murder of George Floyd in Minnesota. We know this. This anti-police sentiment really has impacted significantly officer morale, assignment of officers to traffic duties. We're also seeing understaffing because of people leaving law enforcement. They're tired, they're beaten up, they're frustrated. Many have reached their retirement, where they can retire, and so they are leaving, and we are not seeing the same numbers coming in. And again, states have been sharing information with us about this through our listserv and through other means, and we've been monitoring the national media and the state media. And I point to a January 12th story out of Connecticut. So it's really, really telling about this problem that they reported in the story for both state and local police, the combined number of traffic stops statewide dropped from 512,000 in 2019, so slightly more than 500,000, right, to 188,000 in 2021. So we went from 500,000 in a year to under 200,000. And the article also noted that, and this was a combination of local and state police, they also talked about specifically State Patrol. State Patrol pulled over about 76,000 vehicles in 2020, and that's less than the 157,000 that they stopped in 2019. And they have some preliminary numbers through October that showed they've done about 60,000 stops. So the numbers are coming up somewhat, but not where they were at pre-pandemic levels. And when you look at the fatalities in Connecticut, when you take those fatality numbers and look at them against the traffic stops and what's going on, they had 25 more deaths in 2021 from 2020, and 76 more deaths between 2019 and 2021. We need law enforcement out there on the road. We know high visibility enforcement works. So we need everyone to really help us get that message out there. Yes, there are officers who have done some things that have been dangerous and inexcusable, but we need law enforcement, and the better part of the enforcement folks out there are doing important and necessary and good work. So I will leave it at that. So what do we do? So I want to talk about 4 things really quickly, and I'll try to get through these as fast as possible. We want to focus on enforcement on the dangerous driving behaviors. We need to tap into technology. We need to partner with influencers and survivor advocates to really reach deep into these pockets of groups that we need to be talking to. And we also need to adopt a safe system approach. And I'm sure you're going to be talking about that if you haven't already. And that really brings all of the disciplines together. So let's talk first about enforcement. I think this is so very, very important. We issued a report at GHSA in August of 2021. It was the second of 2 reports that looked at equity in traffic enforcement and traffic fatalities. The first report that came out in June specifically looked at overrepresentation by people of color in our traffic fatalities, and the second report looked at what can we do about it, particularly from the enforcement lens. And we acknowledge in the report that traffic stops are the common way the public comes in contact with law enforcement, and that racial disparities exist both in the frequency of these traffic stops and also in the outcomes of these encounters. So the report went through a series of recommendations about what the state highway safety offices, my organization, and our other partners can do to make sure that we're implementing more equitable highway safety program outcomes, for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, or what I'm going to call BIPOC, which is a common term used today. And we need to focus on enforcing dangerous driving behaviors. That's one of the key recommendations. And I have to confess to you that this is not a popular recommendation among some in the law enforcement community, but we believe it's absolutely critical. The State Highway Safety Office's Mark's office provides grant funds to address behavioral safety issues that are putting all road users at risk. So reinforcing traffic enforcement efforts on traffic safety and prioritizing the most dangerous and unlawful driving behaviors, things like speeding and impaired driving, should be the focus of law enforcement activities that our state highway safety offices are funding. So equity in traffic enforcement is absolutely possible if the focus is on traffic safety and not on pretextual stops, revenue generation, and other types of investigations. And I point to some research, again, the state of Connecticut. They've been doing a lot of research in this area, but they have a racial profiling prohibition project, and they've been analyzing traffic stop data in that state since about 2012. And they found no significant racial or ethnic disparities when law enforcement agencies focus on high-risk safety-related violations for potential traffic stops. So high visibility enforcement coupled with education and public outreach is a proven countermeasure. NHTSA has done tons of work on this. We know it works. But we have to ensure that high visibility enforcement is equitable and that traffic stops don't put the person that's being stopped, their passengers, and the law enforcement officer at risk. This is critical. I can't overstate this. We have to do this. You know, we need to do this, but we also need to use technology. And I point to technology, particularly automated enforcement. This is also a proven tool. The Insurance Institute for Highway Safety has done a ton of research on programs across the country. It is effective. I know that there's some discrepancy. People talk about, well, rear end crashes go up when you first install red light cameras. Yeah, they do. I've done research in my state of New Jersey. I consulted for 10 years. We had a pilot program for red light running for 5 years. There's no doubt about it. But once people understand the technology is there, it does change behavior. It also is far more equitable. It doesn't recognize color. It doesn't look at gender. It looks at the violation, essentially. But again, and this is what's so important about this, when we put red light cameras and speed enforcement cameras on roadways, particularly in small communities or in cities, we need to make sure that the community is involved in the discussion and the data is there to support the need for this. And as the behavior changes, we move the technology because we know that's what we need to do. So we need to engage with the community when we do this kind of work. And the other piece of this, which is important, and I think I speak to the engineers and the planners in this room, automated enforcement cameras collect a ton of data that can be used. It's not just about issuing citations, but leverage this data for understanding what is happening on these roadways, on these intersections. You know, where are the near misses? What is happening out there? Who are the other road users? How can we leverage this technology to learn more and do more? And I understand your state allows for the use of red light cameras. There are ordinances at the state and the local level, and it is silent on speed enforcement, but I would encourage you to think about how you can use speed enforcement, and I point to a checklist that we developed with the Insurance Institute and the National Safety Council and AAA and the Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety that really talks about how to build a program that is transparent and that is truly safety-based. It's not about revenue generation. And I've had many arguments with the industry about this, that you go into a community and you talk about how much money you can generate. That's not what this technology is for. These are safety cameras. That's what it's about. It's about reducing crashes, changing behavior, and saving lives. I'm a little passionate about this, as you can tell. And that's the link to go and find the checklist if you want to get it. Okay, it's a bit.ly link, so I refer you to that. We're also collecting data through some other technology, a company called AccuSensus. Anybody heard of them? Okay, well, they're out there. They're an Australian company. They've been in the States since about 2018, and they're starting to work with DOTs and law enforcement agencies to collect distracted driving and also seatbelt data. And they can capture this information in near real time, and they can do a couple of different things with it. They can send it to a law enforcement officer who could be nearby, who could, could stop and engage that person. Or they can also send it to signs, VMS signs ahead, and send the message to the driver, hey, the law says, you're not supposed to use your cell phones around. Obviously not going to say all that, but basically it says, cell phone in use, that's illegal, or put your cell phone down. And I don't know if you can see the sign there says illegal phone use detected. So it's giving feedback directly to the motorist essentially when they're doing this. It can also tell them about, if we saw you don't have your seatbelt on. And what I love about this is that there's been some NHTSA research done on this that clearly shows that feedback signs, particularly for speeding, work. They get people's attention and they slow down. So I would posit that we could use this technology in a similar way, and I challenge NHTSA to do some research on that to see if that is the case. And there's some promising things happening. Ohio is partnering with AccuSensus. They have some distracted driving corridors that they've designated in their state. They've done some stepped up enforcement, and they've seen crashes go down significantly. And so they're going to be using this to collect better data. I mean, we all know that we don't have great data when it comes to distracted driving. So this is a tool to help us collect that data, which is so very important. The other thing I would point to is how can we incentivize people for driving safely? And there are some there's great technology out there, pretty simplistic. This is On My Way. This is an app that you can sign up for, and it monitors your driving. And if you're not using your cell phone, it rewards you with money, believe it or not, incentivizing people. We have insurance companies that are partnering with Cambridge Mobile Telematics. It's a company built by folks from MIT that are basically monitoring your driving and giving you insurance incentives, right? So if we incentivize people, so it's the carrot versus the stick approach, let's use this technology. Let's reward people. So there's opportunities to do this kind of stuff. I also want to talk about, I'm going to move into more on this technology side, but I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but you heard Stephanie talk about DADS. That's the system in the vehicle that can monitor whether someone is over the legal limit and literally shut the car down, allow them not to drive through either, eye or touch. That's great, but that's a long time in the future, folks. I mean, we have the technology now, and they are testing it in Virginia, but it's way out there until we turn over the fleet. So we have to do more to address both alcohol and drug impaired. And I point to something, what you see on the screen is a Sotexo oral fluid testing device that we're seeing police officers using now in some states to get a better handle in terms of what's happening out there with impaired driving, and particularly looking at drug impaired driving. We need tools to help officers do this. So this oral fluid testing, it's like a portable breath test at roadside. It can obviously determine if there is impairment caused by drugs. It can't conclusively determine the level of impairment, but it can be used to collect evidence for a broader investigation. And one of the challenges we have in impaired driving, and I'm not saying this is an indictment on law enforcement, but when we get a blood alcohol content level that's over the legal limit, traditionally you've got enough to make the case and the investigation stops. But there are many people out there now who are driving with multiple substances in their system. If we don't detect everything that's there and help to address the problem, we're simply putting them back out there on the road again, and here we go. So we've got to break the recidivism cycle. And we have a huge number of people who are high-risk impaired drivers, who are multiple substance users, high BACs, and they've been doing this over and over and over again. And I say this to you not only as a safety advocate, but a survivor of a drunk driving crash. It's scary. So there is a checklist that states can use if they're thinking about bringing oral fluids in. Again, I point to a link where you can find it. This is a one-pager put together by AAA. It's a great resource, so I point to that. And one other thing I want to mention, NHTSA has also done research on some of the devices, and it's a great resource. They have one of their traffic techs that focuses on these screening devices. So there, you can find it there. I also want to point to, and you're going to say technology. Well, if we didn't have cell phones, we wouldn't have ride sharing, right? So it's technology. So we have to find a way to tap into this alternate form of transportation. And I'm so pleased about our partnership that we've had for the last 4 years at GHSA with Uber and Lyft to provide grants to states to do these ride-hailing programs. In North Carolina, received one, and has used it to done impaired driving campaigns. These programs work. And if you've never used ride-hailing, but you've gotten behind the wheel after you had maybe a drink or two, please think about using this service. This is amazing, and promoting it as much as possible. We have a number of states that are doing this, not only with our grants, but other grants across the country, and it really does make a big difference. I just want to point to the fact that there's been some really good research recently. The Journal of the American Medical Association found that Uber, when they entered the Houston market in 2014, weekend motor vehicle crash traumas decreased by 39% for people under age 30, and we know that's an age group that's likely to drink and drive. And there's been other research done on Lyft and just in general, and we've seen significant drops in impaired driving. So this service really can make a difference. And we've got, this is New Mexico, they're doing a focus on this. We have Colorado, and also we did a program in Texas for the fall football season where they used geofencing to get messages out in key markets where they knew they had a problem. They also did some digital advertising and some events. So let me move on quickly, and I want to talk about influencers and advocates for a minute. And I asked the question, how many of you know who this guy is? And I don't expect you to, because we're not of the right age. But, oh, somebody just raised his hand back there. Okay, so this is Zach King. Zach King, remember that name. I didn't know him, but he has 46 million followers on TikTok. And I don't get on TikTok. But I'm learning because I have a 26-year-old son, and he's saying, Mom, you got to check it out. So he's one of the most recognizable social media entertainers, and he does magic tricks. That's what he does. But he's gotten the attention of Chipotle, BMW, Kind, Jumanji, and lots of other organizations who want to partner with him because he's reaching the people they want to reach. Right? And I see Mark writing this down. Okay, so how do we capitalize on this? We should be using this new opportunity. There are lots of influencers out there. We have to be careful, right? Think about, some of the celebrities that other folks have worked with over time who then slipped and did things and it kind of blew up. But there are these young influencers out there, and our target audience in traffic safety, particularly on the driving side, is 18 to 35-year-olds. Okay? So we have to think about this. How do we capitalize on this audience? I think that's important. And what I really want to stress here is that we need to be using authentic voices. People who are part of, that group who people will listen to. I call them authentic voices. And I use the example of what they're doing in Colorado. So they work directly with the cannabis retailers in that state to talk to cannabis consumers about the dangers of driving. The government's not doing it. The cannabis retailers, who they will listen to, and they know, because they've focus grouped this to death, are the ones that they're going to listen to. So the cannabis industry has said, we want to partner with you. We don't want people to use our product and then go out and get involved in a crash, right? So I think it's important that we think about who are these groups that we can work with. And I point to one other example. This is Washington State. The gentleman in the suit and tie is Darren Grundell. He's the former director of the Washington State Traffic Safety Commission, Mark's counterpart in Washington. And Vivian McPeak, who is known amongst the cannabis users as the guy who developed Seattle Hemp Fest. Their big hemp fest, their big, conference they do every year. And they came together and did a series of conversations. They are great to watch. You can Google them and find them online. And push these out through a variety of social media channels. And it created quite a stir, and people started listening. So we need to think about, how do we influence? What can we do? I also point to survivor advocates. This is, I think, really important because we have to put a face on this issue of traffic fatalities. You know, the data, we all live and die by the data. We need the data to figure out where the problems are and how to resolve them and to do resource allocation. But we need to make sure that people understand that real people are involved in these crashes. So I point to the fact that these are the folks that can bring this message home to policymakers, to engage an audience, and to localize an issue. And so, you know, all over the country, we're hearing from advocates more and more who are raising the alarm. There's a group called Families for Safer Streets. It started in New York City. It is now expanding across the country and works very closely with the Vision Zero Network, which I'm sure many of you have heard about. I point to two other amazing advocates who go around the country. This is Melissa Wandel. She's from Florida. She lost her husband to a red light runner. She is the president of the National Coalition for Safer Roads. And then also, we're talking about distracted driving. This is Joel Feldman. He's an attorney who used to, as he'll tell you, use his cell phone all the time when he was out there driving, and learned when he lost his daughter Casey to a distracted driver that this was completely unacceptable. He has an organization called NDD.org. They educate thousands of middle school and high school kids every year for free all across the country, and it's a very impactful and evidence-based program. So I want to stop by talking really briefly about the safe system approach, which is that last strategy on the list. Last December, my organization released a report that you see here on the screen that really makes the case for the integral role of behavioral safety in this approach. And how many of you are familiar with safe system? I would imagine, well, not as many as I thought. Okay, that's fair enough. The whole notion of safe system is that it's really about envisioning eliminating fatal and serious crashes for all road users by creating a transportation system that accommodates our mistakes and keeps crash impacts on the human body at survivable levels. So it's based on 5 key elements, real quickly. Safe road users, safe vehicles, safe speeds, safe roads, and post-crash care. So it's the 4 E's, but we also add equity and evaluation to that as well. And there's a redundancy in the multiple levels of protection that are provided by the things you see up there on the screen. So our report came out because we were hearing that everyone thought this is an engineering-only concept. It is not. It is all the E's working together. We actually had a webinar yesterday with almost 500 people from across the country talking about this very issue. So if you're not familiar with the safe system approach, I encourage you to check out our report. I encourage you to go to the ite.org website. They have lots of great information on this. But this is important. I think this is the direction we need to go. And we are waiting for US DOT to issue a national strategy to help, again, drive these numbers down that we know will be based on the safe system approach as well as equity and traffic enforcement. So I encourage you to check it out. So I'm going to stop there. And again, thank you so much for your attention. I hope I've given you some food for thought. I know as many of you are not necessarily working on the behavioral side, but we are all road users. We are drivers. We are pedestrians. Some of us may be bicyclists. We need to think about what we're doing out there in the system, not only professionally, but personally. And we need to work together. And I join Stephanie in saying, we can do this, but we need to collaborate. Very, very important. So thank you very much. I'm going to let whoever wants to fiddle with that, because I'm not going to touch it.
Thank you, Pam. Our next and final panelist is Dr. Emmanuel Robinson. Emmanuel is a senior research scientist and practice lead of the Center for Human Performance and Safety at Battelle. He is a renowned expert on topics such as decision-making strategies and human factors, traveler-driver behavior and technology, speeding, and behavioral economics. He has led projects for the U.S. Department of Transportation and other federal clients, as well as state and local agencies.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'll jump in, and hopefully you can hear me with a mask on. It's a new experience for, I think, a lot of us. I'm just wearing mine. I have an immunocompromised relative back home, so I have to be very, very careful. But with that, my voice usually carries, so hopefully everyone can hear me. Also, I talk very fast, so it's painful to have me right after lunch usually. So I'll get people woken up and going. So several of the things are already touched on by both Stephanie and Pam, so it's kind of great segues into this. I'm going to focus more on the psychological aspects around some of these risky road behaviors and just why do people do these things? You know, what are the causes behind it? What are the motivations? What are some of the things you can do around what people do for these things? And so I'll focus on those and hit a few examples throughout. There's a lot of research on this. There's a lot of different literature on it. I'm not going to cite things in here as much. I mean, I have a few here and there. But if you have any questions, please let me know afterwards, and I'm happy to share resources or kind of walk through some of this. So first of all, just looking at risky road behaviors. That was mentioned earlier. There are a lot of things that people do out there. And when I was thinking about some of these examples and causes of why people do things and behaviors people approach things with, I focused on main things like aggressive driving, reckless driving, speeding, unbuckled driving, driving under the influence. There are many other things that people do. People are very creative out there, as we know. They find weird things to do on the road and things that can be dangerous, but focusing on those main ones, and there's oftentimes a lot of overlap between those. So to put things into buckets to try to help categorize, organize, like why do people do these things? Well, and there's a cognitive aspects. There are ways that people think about things. There are approaches that people have in their mind about why they're doing it or they don't think about it. And they have different biases or things that they overlook in that respect. There's also emotional, valence type reasons why people do things, habitual type things. And I'll get into these in more detail. And there's also contextual, where you have kind of this interplay of technology or roadway design and the way people think and how their models fit that. And so oftentimes it's everything. There's a combination of reasons why people do the things they do. And then related to the conversation that we're having today is something I call like the COVID-19 kicker. And this is not something that's just in North Carolina. I mean, I started getting phone calls about a year and a half, 2 years ago, back in the beginning of the pandemic, from different media organizations or local agencies in different parts of the country, or actually internationally, asking the same question, like, what's going on? Why are people doing this? Because they thought it was only their community they were seeing this in, and they were seeing anecdotally a lot of speeding accidents and a lot of high speed impacts and things happening that just seemed like it was a lot. And this was before research was starting to be done on this, and we started just brainstorming and trying to get a sense about this. And now we're hearing more things coming out where the data are following. Yeah, these are not just anecdotes that police are seeing out there or that local community news agencies are seeing. It's happening, and there are a variety of reasons for that. So first of all, just focusing on the cognitive reasons. It's not a surprise, and as we know, and we go through our lives, people make a variety of decisions for different reasons, and a lot of times we have biases. We have common things that might be happening in this context. You got the simple herding behavior. People are going along with the herd. There are other people out there driving fast. There might be less cars on the road, but if people are driving fast in the cars that are on the road, somebody might just go along with them. Social norms, it becomes acceptable to start doing this, especially if you didn't have as much enforcement out there, and now people are getting away with it. And, oh, well, if everybody's out there driving, I'm going to do the same thing, drive fast or cut things off or so. You also have this notion of anchoring. When I used to visit my family in Germany, my uncle would pick me up at the airport as a kid, and we'd drive 160 miles an hour from the airport home. You can imagine how that feels differently when I would come back here and get in a car and drive 75 miles or be driven 75 miles, home. It's just, you get used to faster speeds, and it drastically kind of changes kind of what you're used to. And so now if people are driving faster and getting used to it day by day with less cars on the road, it becomes kind of acceptable, it becomes comfortable, and you get used to those speeds. Availability, heuristic, is a term that when we hear things that are salient, like for example, if a plane crashes and 200 people die, a lot of people don't want to fly after that. But if 200 people die in a day because of COVID, or 200 people die on a road in a few days, because of traffic accidents, we don't think about it because it's not being covered in the news as saliently as one incident happened. And so you don't have that information as available. You don't think about it when you get in a car and get out there and drive and do some of these behaviors, that people are dying or being injured or maimed every day at numbers much greater than you would see for a train accident or a plane crash or so. Framing is another thing. How do you frame this information? What type of rationalizations do you use around how you're doing this or what you're doing? You might not see why you're doing it. You might not see the perspective of it, and that happens a lot, and people are not aware of these things when they're on the roads often. You also have this thing of poor calibration and kind of a lack of awareness of what you're doing, and this is something that happens oftentimes, overconfidence. So everybody thinks they're above average. The Lake Wobegon effect. Well, we know that can't be the case. Everybody's a good driver. Oh, I can drive fast, I can drive reckless, I know what I'm doing, I'm okay, I can correct myself if there's a problem. overconfidence. And then also we have this thing where people don't understand the risk-reward trade-offs. It's something that in finance there's a term called, picking up pennies in front of a steamroller. You keep getting these little benefits, bit by bit by bit, a penny here, a penny here, a penny here, until you slip and that steamroller rolls over you. Same thing with speeding or some of these other behaviors. What do? You gain a minute, you gain 2 minutes maybe on most trips if you speed excessively. And you can keep doing that every day, every day, every day until eventually you don't, and then you really run into a big problem. If you've ever seen a car work really hard to get in and out of traffic in a crowded thing, and they're working, and they only get up 3 car lengths, and it's a lot of work to get just 3 car lengths up. But if they get in an accident now, not only have they hurt themselves or other people, they've screwed up everybody's commute, and that's bad risk reward of understanding and trade-off. And there are a lot of other things. Any one of these things are research fields in unto themselves. And there are a lot of these that I have fun going into some details and exercises and things like this when we give workshops or we do things on these topic areas. And it's amazing how little things can influence how you think about things. Or some exercises I usually do where a number might prime you to think a different way without realizing, or make a decision without realizing it. And oftentimes this happens when people get in their car, they get on the road, they do things, they don't think about things as much. And as you see, there are just many, many more biases, and I can always give you more information on these if you're ever interested in some of these, but I always find it as a fascinating topic area, and we see a lot of this in the transportation domain. You have other things that happen, just people deny the outcomes. I'm not going to get in an accident. Oh, it's not going to be that bad. I'm safe. They just don't even want to think about it. You get this happening in hit-and-run accidents sometimes. It's fascinating, and we've all heard the quote-unquote urban myths. They're not actually urban myths. They're it happens, unfortunately, more times than you'd like to know. Somebody hits someone, and they just keep on driving, and they don't realize they did it. Or they drive home with the person lodged in their windshield or on their hood. Because their mind has shut off things so much they can't process such a bad thing happening. So you can imagine on a lesser scale, a person not being able to understand, oh, I can get in an accident that could hurt me or somebody else, drastically. They just don't even want to think about it. Interrationalization, we get this all the time. Think about it. Like in the Beltway, for example, up in the D.C. area, we are, I'm sure in toll roads and other places too. You pay a few dollars and you can go on the toll lanes, which are going to go faster than the local traffic. And the speed limit is faster. It's 10 miles an hour faster, and much faster usually depending on traffic. So, okay, you pay a few dollars to go 10 miles an hour faster. Well, how is that any different than paying a few more dollars to go even faster? Speeding tickets. I get a ticket every once in a while, but I'm just paying to use express lanes, quote unquote. Some people rationalize these things like this. Even experts do it. A colleague of mine did a little interesting little study a few years ago with the Human Factors and Ergonomics Society that we're part of, and these were some of the experts in distraction that work with NHTSA and other places, that are doing the research. All of us are in there doing this, and these people know about this better than anything else. Since we had an anonymous survey and questionnaire that they could do. Do you do some of these behaviors? Do you text? Do you or are you distracted and doing other things at a time? And maybe not surprisingly, a lot of people did. But what was interesting about it was that they had these great explanations. If you'd read through it, it was, yeah, but I only text in 2-second intervals because I'm the expert in this area, and I know that's the safe amount of time I can text before I have to recover. and they had all of these great stories that they would tell about why they did it, but they still did it. And as we know, as much as you think you're the overconfidence bias, you can still get in an accident. You can still hurt someone. And so that's, happening. Distraction, of course, is another thing, and it's related to that. That people are, especially now, are getting more and more distracted. We're going to see that happening as vehicles become more and more automated, that people are going to do things that they could never have done on the road before, at least not reasonably, sleep, read a book, watch TV, et cetera. And then you're going to have to figure out how to connect that with the vehicle awareness of what they're doing and being able to take charge of that vehicle again when they have to switch out of an automated zone or so. And this is coming. We're doing a variety of research on this in these areas. And then on emotional reasons, we have a lot of things that go on there, but these are just a sampling of the types of things that people do. There's a lot of work done in the UK and other places looking at things like habit and past speeding behavior being one of the best predictors of if you're going to do it again. This theory of planned behavior. You take kind of this attitude that people have to things, and you look at the control they have around it, and then that should give you an indication of intent. And intent then is the proxy for behavior. So why do people do these things? Well, you find that because they've done it before. They feel comfortable doing it. There's this motivation and self-concept part of this. Important people speed. I got to go somewhere. I have places to go. I got to get there. I'm important. Other people are important speed. Why can't I? Type things. People do this. These are not rational necessarily, but that's what they think oftentimes. And researchers looked at some of the explanations people have given when they've gotten caught with speeding or reckless driving behavior or so. Anticipated regret and morality play a role. If you think you're going to really feel bad if you get in an accident or you get a ticket that's really expensive or so, you might not. If you think it's bad to do, just simply immoral, then you probably won't. It's not a surprise there, but these are some of the things that separate out individuals who are more likely to do it versus are not, or more resistant to it. Then you also have rebelliousness, it kind of leads into that, and anti-government regulation sentiment. I mean, we see this, as you know, in some parts of the country. We've done studies with NHTSA and other places. We've been out in the middle of nowhere, Utah, or in the mountains in Tennessee, and you get folks who say, look, I don't want the government telling me anything, and I'm going to do it because the government told me not to do it. That's a different level of resistance that you have to deal with. You have, it's my prerogative thing. Folks who didn't want to wear seatbelts, we were working with communities, and folks would say, look, I don't want to wear a seatbelt because I'm not hurting anybody else. It's my body. If I don't want to wear a seatbelt, I don't have to. Of course, we know if they get in an accident, costs, health insurance rise, all of that, and a variety of other things happen. Other people in the car could be hurt if they have children, and so that's something you have to deal with. You also have this is a great example I always like to use. Jack Johnson was a famous boxer in the early 1900s, and he was very kind of out there about it, in your face. And he would drive around in their equivalent of fancy sports cars at the time, and he would get tickets regularly. He was an African-American boxer, which was breaking a lot of thresholds at the time. And so police, of course, didn't like when he would do some of the things he would do. And he would be in the South, and he would drive around. And as the story goes, he gets pulled over one time, and he says, the ticket officer gives him a ticket. He gives it back to the officer for, say, $50. He gives the officer $100 back. And, he says, keep the change. And the officer says, why? He says, well, I'm going to drive through here just as fast as I came through the first time. So just write me the second ticket now. Now, I've never had a chance to use that line, but if you ever do, please let me know how it goes. Have you had a chance to use that? Oh, okay, can I hear? Oh, it's probably low, yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah, it was angled down. Thank you for letting me know. I couldn't hear it up here. Thank you. And that is another example of this kind of rebelliousness attitude, the cool factor, and people say sometimes, oh, they're doing it because it's cool, it's excitement, they want to get out there on the road. We started seeing that, especially in the beginning of COVID, and we're seeing more, information and studies coming out about that, and when people are doing these types of things, that they're, they feel like there's anxiety, cabin fever, they're being at home, they want to get out, they want to do things, especially in the beginning of the pandemic. People are out a little bit more now, so we're seeing some of that regulate. And then you have contextual reasons, just technology. Cars are more stable, smooth, more insulated. There's more power behind them. You can easily get up to 100 miles an hour in a car now and not feel any different. Versus, before, cars are rattle at 65 miles an hour, wind, things like this. You also have this risk compensation or what's called a Peltzman effect that happens where people take riskier actions when they feel like they're protected. So, right now we have vehicles that have bubbles around you. I mean, you have airbags and all around you, top, bottom, left, right, and you have all of these great little safety devices and features. So now people are saying, oh, I can drive faster. I can survive an accident. I'm okay. And even though that's not oftentimes how it goes. I mean, we see this in football. I mean, one of the beliefs is you take helmets away, people won't be as risky in there. You won't have as many concussions. I mean, you see this in a lot of different fields, and we're seeing it in vehicle or in driving behavior too. Traffic flow, as I mentioned earlier, you have kind of social norms. Well, you also have this other notion of just if you set speed limits based on kind of the social norms, then you have speed limits that fit a little bit more with the the going kind of rate at people go in that area. Same with roadway design. Sometimes speed limits are not tied to roadway design as much as they should be or could be. And then you have things like passenger effects. We did a study a few years ago, I believe it was for NHTSA, but I was looking at teen drivers and some of the risky behaviors they would do, and it was probably not surprising, but fascinating to see. If you had like a young teen male driver, he oftentimes would drive a little riskier, faster than his drivers of other types of older drivers are more experienced. But if you take that young male driver and have another young male driver in a car, or another male in the car as a passenger or other passengers, he'll do even riskier behaviors. But if you have a younger female driver in a car, he'll slow and temper his behavior down a little bit. And if you have a middle-aged female in the car, presumably his mother, he's going to drive real slow and careful. And we saw this, and it would just those passenger effects would move around, the person's behavior. So they are able to regulate their behavior, but it oftentimes has other things involved. And of course, time pressure and emergency type things. So what can be done? And I'm going to focus a little bit more on the psychological aspects of some of these things and some things that are not as common, both nationally and internationally. Of course, you have the mainstays, as we all know, and we've heard a little bit about it, speed cameras, high visibility enforcement, penalties and fines, things like this that come into play. And to the earlier discussion about, maybe bias in citations or so, a couple quotes I always find interesting. This first one was from a trooper in Missouri. We were working with them on some of their enforcement campaigns, and he said, there shouldn't be much interpretation. See violation, write citation. That's what he's trying to teach his troopers. Tennessee had a similar version. See it, get it. And that was their troopers said it. And at the end of the day, they were trying to build their enforcement campaigns on just being unbiased and focusing on it, on what was being done out there. And a lot of times it's very clear. That helps obviously those campaigns. But those are the types of things that can happen and be part of the types of penalties or fines that are instituted. Finding the right frame and tailoring around education and training. I mean, you've heard about this in a variety of contexts before, and some of this came up earlier in discussions too. But give you an example, in Utah, we were working with, this was a NHTSA study, we're working with law enforcement agencies and also local communities out there. And these were particularly communities that were resistant to seatbelt use. So we're talking 30 to 40% usage. I mean, it was just phenomenal to be out there and see this. I mean, just everybody driving around without a seatbelt. I mean, you couldn't imagine it, given some of the areas we're used to. And even the law enforcement agencies, they didn't want to wear seatbelts. I mean, the sheriff's department, most of them didn't wear seatbelts. And they actually felt like they shouldn't, and they had all these excuses and reasons or so. Well, one of the things that we found, and our colleagues who were doing the implementation of this, were out there regularly and working with this community, and they found that the officers said, yes, they would write tickets if a child was in the vehicle. That was the only time they felt it was okay to write a ticket for seatbelt use. So they said, okay, well, let's start there. So he started with the law enforcement officers plus the local schools plus businesses that then started supporting campaigns with the local schools. There's the kids being the key. And that shifted things in this community. And over a couple of years, they went from 30 to 40% use to 80 to 90% use. And we went out on the evaluation side for a year or two afterwards, studying them and seeing what was going on. And sure enough, they stayed consistent with that higher use. It was an amazing transformation. It probably is not something that can be done everywhere, but it was an example of using a tailored approach and really understanding some of the norms of that community. And of course, licensing and remediation, things like this, and then static signage, which we have out. And then there are a few other things that come into play that are not as common, or becoming more common in certain ways, or not as common here, and I'll get into these in a little bit. You have roadway feedback dynamic message signs, and this, Pam mentioned earlier, and it's something, it works, I mean, and for a variety of reasons, but if you see these things, you drive along and you see this number up, sometimes it's an awareness thing, you don't realize how fast you're going, back to the comment about cars and driving and not feeling, or just being distracted and not realizing that you're driving fast. People will slow down, or it's just sometimes shaming. You're like, oh, I'm going so fast, and you kind of look around, and people sheepishly adjust their behavior, and then they get into whatever the social norms are for that community, or the sign that they should be following. In-vehicle messaging, monitoring of speeding behavior, for example, or risky driving behaviors. So just giving that initial feedback that oftentimes will make a difference. We see this kind of tied into other things. Driver monitoring systems now are becoming more and more advanced, and there's still a long way to go, but we're doing a lot of work with different agencies on this and seeing kind of the things that can be done to kind of nudge behavior around what people are doing. Last point I kind of cross out, but it's an example. If we go to an extreme, a colleague of mine always had this conversation about this. He felt that, well, if you just took away seatbelts and took away airbags and put steel spikes on everybody's steering wheel, you'd stop speeding and reckless behavior like that. I mean, it's a solution. I can't imagine any auto manufacturer that's going to sell that, but it's something that, as you can imagine, people will adjust their behavior. I mean, as an extreme, you can do things, but I'm not advocating for that, obviously. And then more kind of psychological, countermeasures, and these are more common internationally, but we're seeing more and more here now. You have this notion of traffic calming, and this is by Monderman and folks like in the Netherlands and other places that have really looked at what can you do in the environment to adjust people's behavior, and it's related to this notion of quote-unquote nudging, and this is something that Richard Thaler had won the Nobel Prize on, and there are other individuals have done this work, and it's not directly changing someone's behavior, it's adjusting their behavior subtly. And things like, for example, you put a bicycle up at a child's bicycle at a stop sign in a local community. You're going to get people to stop at that stop sign or slow down, more so than a lot of the other things you can do. Simple reason, people say, oh, they're children. They didn't realize they're going to adjust their behavior. You don't directly enforce it. You're just nudging them to adjust their behavior to what will be safer for that environment. Scantily clad models, you put pictures of that up, and some countries have done this, and believe it or not, people will slow down, people will adjust their behavior for a variety of reasons. Not advocating that either, but that's something that people have done. Sculptures and other, things like this, art of different types. I mean, people will put that up in areas. I have some pictures up on this slide from Japan, I believe, and Netherlands, and a couple of, and one other place that has different projections or art type things that are put there that get people's attention, and people will adjust their behavior as a result. You also have rewards and using certain behavioral economics techniques. This was mentioned earlier in one of the presentations about insurance companies and getting rewards. Like, for example, if you, it's how you frame it, and this is back to the framing notion again. If you tell people, look, if you're driving dangerously, we're going to increase your insurance by $50 a quarter or so. People aren't going to like that. But if you tell them, hey, if you put this app on your phone and you drive safely, we'll give you a discount. People like that. Financially, it's the same thing. It's the same as a ticket, really, but it's the way you frame it. And insurance companies know this, and they're using this, and this actually is a good thing to get people to adjust their behavior. You can also give people a sense of community, come up with a reward system. There are some programs that are doing this where you can gamify driving behavior and use it where people are getting rewards for doing certain things. That is one way that's pretty effective. And and then overall, just many reasons and kind of many countermeasures that come out. So I've touched on a few things. There are many different reasons and motivations for people doing this, but just understanding, the community, the individuals, and trying to tie what matters for that particular area, those individuals, those communities, and tailoring and adjusting it a bit. And some things that kind of bubble up that you can incorporate into things that are done are like these nudges. Illustrated crosswalk, for example, is an example, and locally in Durham, there's just take a crosswalk. You're going to do it anyway. Do it in a way that gets an attention and that actually enhances the community, but also gets people to pay attention to it, and they'll adjust their behavior around it. Using bad biases and framing things a certain way, to get people to adjust their behavior. So it could be a bias, but it also could be something as a strength or a technique you can use in order to get people to adjust their behavior. And then just pointing out things like this is a campaign by the Highway Patrol here. I thought was a pretty fascinating one. It's very simple and some messaging, but it's very effective messaging. It says, speed a little, lose a lot. This is a notion, again, that people don't understand sometimes what they're doing. A little bit of speeding, you're not really gaining most of the time, but you could lose a lot if the one time you're not. And so effectively changing your messaging to understand these things are important. Yeah, and in closing, just a lot of risky behaviors. There are limited things that happen out of those behaviors, but there's no one size fits all. That's kind of the take-home message. That you have to adjust. You bring in incorporate a variety of different things. Include some of these psychological measures. Oftentimes they get left out, just because we are dealing with behavior and we're dealing with why people do things, and then trying to understand that and adjusting around this is important. And a combination of these things, make a difference. Like the safe systems approach mentioned earlier. I mean, that's something. A combination of approaches will help get at a very complicated area because people are not usually motivated by just one thing, and people are not all the same that are doing some of these behaviors. So there are things you can do, but you have to adjust it and use a combination of those around. I think that is it. With that being said, if you have any questions, comments, please let me know. But thank you. This was a fun topic to discuss. I'm happy that people are interested in it.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Thank you to all the panelists for such engaging presentations on what ended up being a variety of issues about the deadly roads that we've had since the pandemic and really before the pandemic. We just got a lot of work to do. I know it's close to 3 o'clock, but at least I want to try to look at our poll question. If we don't do anything else, I'm not sure we're going to have time for many questions, but at least let's look at the poll results. If you remember the question, what actions can be taken to reduce traffic deaths from speeding, impaired driving, and non-buckled passengers? Do we have that? Okay, that's fine. So we maybe have a minute or two for just a few questions. Does anyone have a question for any of the panelists? Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Hi, thanks for the presentation. It was really good and dear to my heart. I'm Julie Eisel, Charlotte City Council Mayor Pro Tem, and the red light camera thing has been bugging me for a few years, and I can't get CMPD, honestly, or city government to really pursue it. And I understand the issues for CMPD, I really do. But what I'm getting back is if we don't have to do the enforcement, we'll take a look at it. And I hear what they're saying. So what have you seen in other cities with jurisdictions, municipalities that are getting code enforcement? Nobody wants to do the enforcement piece of it, but to me, the data collection, the objectivity of it is just really seems like a good idea.
I can speak to that. We have cities, it's normally falls under the law enforcement agency for that community. And so there needs to be somebody who's physically reviewing the video images. You know, that's the one thing that's really important for a program to be fully transparent. You have to make sure that, you know, the provider of the technology is not the final authority in deciding is it a violation or not. There needs to be somebody in the local community, law enforcement, who's doing that. What some agencies have done is, because this should be a self-funding program, is that they've hired somebody who has been trained to review the violations and to determine if it is indeed a violation or not. They are supervised by a uniformed officer, so they have put people in those positions to do that. You know, and it works fine. It works very, very effectively. I've seen it happen in my state when we had our pilot program, and I've seen it happen in other states as well. So that's one way to do it. I would encourage you to get your hands on the checklist that I shared. It's really important that you have the data to support the problem, that you've tried to do other things to address this, where they're engineering efforts to re-engineer the intersection where you have this problem. Has there been efforts to enforce it, and you just couldn't have the officers out there, or maybe it's not the most safe place to put an officer? You know, there's a whole variety of things at play here. Have you had situations where the community is saying, look, you know, we feel unsafe. We can't cross at these intersections. We're having issues. So you need to mobilize. You need to get your data. You need to bring the community together, and look at all these things. And it should be a supplement to, not a replacement to enforcement. It should be a supplement to, but it does work and it does change behavior. And so it takes a lot of on the ground work. But I encourage you not to give up, and to take a look at the checklist. And also, I would encourage you to tap into Melissa Wandel from the National Coalition for Safer Roads. She is a dynamo. She really can help you in terms of figuring out the best way to strategize on this. And if I were still consulting, I'd be happy to come work with you, but I'm not anymore. But I believe in this technology. But again, get everybody at the table, and make sure you're engaging with your local community members. They need to be a part of this and understand what's going on. And then if you can get it through, it's got to be as transparent as possible. Report on what's going on. Show how it's making a difference. Don't focus on the revenue. Focus on the improvement in safety, because that's what this is. It's a safety program. See me after, and I'll give you the link, okay?
I have a question on that same technology. So how do you change the perception? Because every time I read the Washington Post, one of the most hated agencies in D.C. government is traffic enforcement. And that C Street exit by the Capitol and over by the Washington Nationals, the Washington Post always focuses on how much D.C. government got, how many millions in revenue. So that's what the public hears, and so there's no buy-in. So what's being done to change that perception?
We are working very hard to reframe the what we call this technology. It's a safety camera. That's what it is. And that's what we need to be saying out there whenever we talk about this. We do work with the Washington Post. We do talk to the New York Times. We do talk to Forbes. And every time we talk to them, we talk about nomenclature and how they're framing these discussions. So whether we're talking about automated enforcement, quote, safety cameras, or we're talking about crash versus accident, or a lot of these other terminologies we use, we are really trying to educate the media about what this technology is and what it does. And that's our challenge. And so I repeat what Stephanie said. We need to work together to address this. So when you're talking to a reporter, whether they're print or broadcast or whatever, and they say something that they call them, the revenue generator, you say, they're safety cameras, and here's why. Let me tell you. or they say other things that are, really are not helping our cause, bring it up. We need to be vocal and correct those things, and we need to work with the media and educate them. And they're very receptive. I've talked to tons of reporters in my career about this technology, and they start out very indignant, but when they learn and understand why and how, and we do, I've said to them, I've taken the industry on and said, stop talking about revenue generation. Yes, the cameras can basically pay for themselves, but that's not the point. We want to put them out of business. That's our job, all of us. Our job is to put ourselves out of business, right? Not to generate revenue, but to put ourselves out of business because people are behaving, people aren't crashing, lives are saved. I would like nothing more than to retire tomorrow and play golf. So, that's what this is all about. So my job is to make sure that the reporters understand that the self-fulfilling prophecy of these safety cameras is that we won't need them because the behavior will be changed, and we shut them off. That's what we're trying to get to. Simple as that.
If you'll look on the screen now, we've got our answers to our poll question. The answer that was the most percentage was increasing law enforcement, which was brought up in the presentations. Build safer roads, which was really not discussed much, and speeding red light cameras was the third highest percentage. So that's our poll results. If you'll all join me in showing appreciation for Stephanie, Pam, and Emmanuel, thank you for today. Just as a reminder, after this session, we've got a 30-minute break. Then we'll all gather for our next session at 3:30. Don't forget to visit our vendors and exhibitors. Please remember to wear your mask and be socially distant. And again, thank you for being with us today.